Welcome into a special Inside Carolina Game Plan podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. It's special because down at the bottom, Joey Powell is joining the mainstay here. He's joining because this is also going to be an Inside Carolina Live special as well. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, if you miss any portion of this, you could probably hear a lot of it tomorrow at 8 o'clock, along with Denora, Cersei, and Joey riffing on, while we're here today, the Fenway Bowl. Greg Barnes, since you're the elder statesman of the bunch, I'm coming to you first. Two basketball schools, quote unquote, playing football in a baseball stadium. Could that sum up bowl season any better?
It is perfect. And look, people like to complain about because the CFP has arrived with 12 teams, that the rest of the bowls don't matter. Well, this one right here is a great example of why they all matter. Is that convincing? I don't know. Look, this is good for North Carolina for really one reason. Well, two reasons. The first reason, of course, is to help the seniors, the guys that have been around a long time, graduate with a win, with a winning record, kind of to go out the right way. You have to remember that a lot of these guys their first years were during COVID. And that was a very difficult stretch for all these students, not just athletes, but just students in general. And I think from that standpoint, this game should be celebrated for that purpose and to really give these kids an opportunity. They had a chance to vote no on playing the bowl game. Bubba Cunningham gave them that opportunity, and they decided they wanted to play. And, Freddie Kitchens and the rest of the staff has been hard at work with them to get this kind of over the hump. And I think that's important. The other part, and this is kind of more probably important to the fan base, is this is one of several tryout periods for the next era. Everybody that's going to be playing in this game on Saturday at Fenway, they are using this as a live action opportunity to impress Bill Belichick and the next coaching staff. There's so many of these bowl games that we've seen this year, but we've also seen North Carolina playing them in recent years where there's really no reason. You're just kind of going through the motions, trying to get, you've got all your goodies, all your swag. You're trying to get home for New Year's because you missed Christmas. That's not the case now. Now you know that Bill Belichick has been watching you since ball practice started a couple weeks ago. This is your opportunity to make a name for yourself and to give yourself a leg up on everybody else entering spring practice and then, of course, into the summer and training camp. So I think that's the exciting thing. And that's one of the reasons I really expect North Carolina, although they're down a number of guys, to really come out and play determined, to play focused, and really get after it. Because while UConn's certainly not a great team, they don't have near the issues with attrition thus far that Carolina has. I think Morris said that they've got one healthy player that opted out, and everybody else is playing. Carolina's not in that situation. Therefore, they're going to have to play hard and play well. And I expect them to put a spirited performance on the field.
Jason, I'll get you in here. Obviously, the latest news earlier today, Willie Lampkin not playing tomorrow, which we're going to find out what kind of O-line depth that this North Carolina team has in a hurry without Lampkin out there, of course, without Howard Sampson, who got paid to go west, young man. Jason, what are your thoughts here, the importance of this game? And let's go ahead and get it out here since it's been a big discussion on the message boards. Evidently, Bill Belichick's not going to be there. And folks there's some consternation about that. I don't think that matters. But, Jason, what you think?
Why would it matter that whether he's there or not?
It matters, man. You got to be sitting in the cold weather to watch the team play. I'm joking. I wouldn't be there if I were him. Not with that
team. And what you're trying to do for Belichick is deal with the stuff for next year. And that's going to start with watching a lot of film on these guys and, how they play. And this is going to, is a bit of an audition for you, but you're not going to really see a whole lot. You don't see very much when you're on the sideline. Maybe you could go and sit in the booth, but I mean, it's really not that important. So, and I'm being told my audio is a little low, so I'll try to let that.
If you could zip up the quarter zip so we don't have to see that and get the mic closer. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. We good? Is that any better?
Not really.
We'll see. I'll adjust as I'm able. But what essentially, how about that?
There you go.
Essentially, Belichick's effort here, his goal is going to be to put the best team on the field he can next year. And if being there at Fenway this week is not going to do that, if he doesn't think that, he doesn't need to be there. I can guarantee you he's gotten plenty of opportunities to take a look at what he's coming into on the sidelines at practice. He's had a chance to watch a lot of practice footage and film as he needs, but he's got other things he's dealing with. Now, as far as the game itself, these postseason exhibitions are, they're difficult to project because you don't know who all is going to play. I mean, a good example of that, as you said, is the late withdrawal today with Willie Lampkin out. That radically changes what North Carolina's been up front. I mean, he's been their best offensive lineman for 2 years, and he's been by far their best and most consistent offensive player, not named Omarion Hampton. And Hampton's already not playing, and then you're losing him for this game. That changes the complexion of this. And then the other question is, I mean, they say that the majority of the guys that are in the portal are going to continue to play. Well, which ones are and which ones aren't? And, obviously you've got one who's already, one of your other more important ones was Sampson, who's moved on, and I don't expect to see him out there. I mean, I actually have not paid enough attention to know whether or not he's even practiced, but I'm guessing not. So at that point, these postseason exhibition games basically boil down to an opportunity to get a bunch of practices for Kitchens being a guy that's going to be on the offensive staff for Bill Belichick. You can bet your britches that they've been in plenty of contact about the kinds of things that need to be done in this pre-exhibition game practice schedule to be able to build some toughness, to build some habits that he wants done, certain things that maybe Kitchens was frustrated by previously. That's going to be some of the stuff that they're going to focus on. And it's an opportunity to get a jump on some of that. But beyond that, enjoy the chance to see an exhibition of some of these guys. It'll be their last time in Carolina blue. Some of these guys, it's a chance for them to exhibit what they're capable of, but for the staff that's going to be around next year. But that's basically it.
Get in here, Joey. I mean, there's a depth chart out there, folks. If you haven't seen it, it's on the Inside Carolina Premium message board. Somebody asked, was Kobe Paysour on it? He's was playing. He's on the depth chart.
Just because they're on there doesn't mean they're playing, guys.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's one of the things that I learned last year in the exhibition game known as the Orange Bowl. Guys that were on the depth chart for either side, it doesn't mean that they're actually playing. These games are completely different.
Yeah, I think, Tommy, I think Jason hits on something that might lead me to where I ended up when I was trying to look at this game. And I don't want any judgment from the other three guys on here, but I actually was trying to find UConn game highlights to go back and watch this morning because, boy, my life sucks right now. But seriously, UConn does not have a ton of guys opting out. They're going to miss Bell, their best wide receiver, is still listed, to Jason's point, on the UConn 2 deep, but sounds like he's not going to play. They're missing a DB that's transferred, a running back that's headed to Auburn. I mean, a couple impact players, but so is North Carolina. And I felt a lot better about North Carolina's chances before seeing the stuff about Willie Lampkin. I think one of the things I would ask Jason and Greg, if all things are considered equal and it ends up being more of UNC's second string against UConn's second string, does that favor the Tar Heels? Do you feel like the Tar Heels have better depth than what UConn may have? Jason, I'll throw that to you first.
No. Basically, to me, I look at this UConn team lost to Duke by 5 points at Duke. There's a common opponent. They lost to Wake Forest at home by 3 points. So it gives you, and they lost to Syracuse 31-24 at Syracuse. So they've been competitive, and we know that the majority of their list is going to play. I mean, now if it's just second string versus second string, I think it's pretty close to even, except that if you look at what North Carolina's been without, say, Kamen Rucker on the field and without a few of their key frontline guys, you know, I think North Carolina has been probably a little bit more dependent on a few of their top line guys than maybe UConn has been, which, you know, suggests to me that maybe missing some of those frontline guys will impact them more.
Greg, your thoughts here? Carolina's without Hampton, we've talked about. Power Eccles, Kamen Rucker, Stick Lane. I mean, these are names that North Carolina fans have come to rely on, and they're not playing in this game. Your thoughts? You mentioned earlier the tryout aspect of this for Belichick, but you ultimately want to win the game. So what does Carolina do on defense? Is it time for Travis Shaw to show that he's legitimately a guy that can make plays and start, or you know, where are we?
Yeah, so there's two parts of this, and one is the energy and effort and tenacity part of things. And because of, like we've already talked about, with this being somewhat of a tryout for the next staff, I think that part of the component is going to be about as high as we've probably seen all year long, which is a good thing. And to Jason's point, there was a marked difference in the defense with Kamen Rucker on the field versus the games when he was not. I don't know that effort and intensity is going to make up for that difference. And I think his impact on defense is probably similar to what Lampkin's is going to be on the offensive line. Those are your two stalwarts. Those are your two leaders. Those are key individuals that you need to really anchor those lines, and they're both going to be out. That's problematic. However, we've heard that for years now that there's a good bit of depth. And I think this kind of gets to what Joey was talking about. That has not just they've not been able to beat out the starters, but they're coming. We've heard that for a while. Well, we get to find out against UConn if that's true or not. And we've heard a lot about Ronnie Laura. He's a kid who has a lot of potential, just waiting for him to break through. Does he get a lot of snaps? Shaw's a good example. Beau Atkinson, right? We saw a lot of flashes from him as a freshman. He took another step this year. Can he have a really strong game? I mean, I think what everybody hopes for is that you see more Josh Downs out there, right? Because we knew all of a sudden that, wait a minute, this kid wasn't playing a lot. He gets into a big bowl game because they're opt-outs, and he explodes and becomes a fantastic offensive weapon for North Carolina. So the hope is that you see that type of thing where some of these guys who haven't played a lot kind of pop. And then you start having, okay, well, this kid's going to be a player maybe in the years to come.
Greg, did you go full Dion on us there a second ago? Like, did you drop a Coach Prime in there with a they're coming? Because that's I didn't know anybody else could say that, but Coach Prime. That's what I heard.
I think Mac Brown may have said that before Dion, to be honest with you.
Dear God. Tommy, you've watched a lot of football, and that's my nice way of calling you old. Merry Christmas. But I want to ask, when you watch games like this where guys seemingly have either different motivations or as many distractions as this team has had, how do you – I feel like they always show up and lay an egg, but you've probably seen some instances where – there was distractions and plenty of reasons for North Carolina to be terrible, and for some reason in a bowl game they showed up and played well. I can't think of that in recent history, but I'm going to ask you, Tommy, have you seen situations where you fully expected North Carolina to gag the postseason exhibition away, and they surprised you?
Well, I mean, I think we can go recent history on where they've had opportunities. They've put themselves into position to have opportunities to win. And to your point, they've lost it. I mean, the Orange Bowl against Texas A&M. I mean, I was there. I legitimately thought when Josh Downs caught that long touchdown that Carolina had a chance to win that game against Texas A&M without their two running backs and their receivers, and then they just didn't have enough to hold up in the end. Same with Oregon last year, right? They had Oregon on the ropes, and now look at Oregon this year. Different team, but still it's Oregon, and they're number one with a bullet this year. And so I think to Greg's point, the opportunities have been there for Carolina football over the years, and they just can't take them. And that's what you want to see in a game like this. All these young guys. I mean, Greg mentioned Laura. You've got, Daniel Anderson is somebody we talked about way back in the spring and in camp as being a guy that was making noise. He's on that depth chart. Zach Rice is probably going to have to play a significant amount. Luke Masterson, who if you talk to people in the program,
love that guy.
Yeah, they kind of wondered why he wasn't playing this year. Now he gets an opportunity. So you see Johnny Norwood, Jani Norwood is another guy from camp, and I butchered his name. I always say Yanni, but that's
you're supposed to butch the back, not the name, Tommy.
So you've got all these guys. What I'm interested in seeing is, they can come out. It's an audition or whatever. How well is it going to make the team play? Because I don't think this game matters, and I'd love to get all three of y'all's opinion here. I don't think it matters win-loss level too much, but do you really want to lose to UConn in football? I mean, no offense to UConn, and Jim Mora's got a team that can win, 10 games this year?
UConn. Come on, let's go. Let's be real.
We're talking about the Fenway Bowl, not a game.
We're talking about
not a game. The Fenway Bowl.
UConn here.
This is not Danny Hurley's UConn. And so Carolina needs to come out and play, and not only play with their hair on fire and all that, but play well. The thing that concerns me, and Jason, I'll ask you this because you've played the sport in a lot of different environments. It's going to be cold and nasty. And Jacoby Criswell has not played well when it's cold. And I don't know if that's an excuse.
Have y'all seen the picture of the field yet? Tommy, I'm sorry to step on you, but you were going where have y'all seen what the field looks like?
It's not pretty.
Yeah, it looks like my yard, doesn't it? Like
it's gross.
Browned out.
Well, yeah, but there's also there's snow drifts backed up off the corner, the edge of the field, and I see that photo, and I think it was Ariel Bynum that posted it. So shout out to Ariel for putting that on social. But I saw that. I want no part of that. Please continue, Jason, to answer Tommy's question.
Yeah, cold weather quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, cold weather changes the way the ball sits in your hand, for one. And some guys are better cold weather throwers than others. And some of it has to do with hand size. Some of it has to do with, other factors. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes why it is. I mean, different release points, whatever. But some guys are better cold ball throwers. I mean, I can think of two. Well, you just look at three guys from the NFL from the past. And Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger were very good cold weather throwers of the football. When they threw the ball in cold weather, they were able to drive the ball still. Peyton Manning struggled as a cold weather thrower through much of his career. And he was an indoor, he had the advantage of playing indoors most of the time for his home games through most of his career. But the ball fluttered on him a little bit when he got into cold weather. It's just harder to drive the ball, and it also impacts the way that you catch it. The ball hits, it hits heavier. It just, things change about that. And then if you add wind to it, which often comes with cold weather, wind changes everything for being able to throw the football. And some guys, again, the tighter the spiral and the more RPMs you put in the ball, generally the less the wind is going to impact your throw. And actually, stronger arm guys tend to like to throw into the wind rather than against it, or rather than with it, because of the way that their ball will cut through whereas it'll sail on them in with the wind. But it changes everything when it comes to execution there. So again, it's a little unpredictable when you've got guys that haven't played much in that kind of weather context. And like I said, Brady was a mutter. He was a guy that played some really good football when the ball was cold and when the ground was cold and when he had to deal with the elements. The biggest thing though is when those things change and when it gets more challenging to throw the football, the team that can run it is usually the team that wins the game. Football's pretty simple. What is football? First and foremost,
line of scrimmage game.
It's a line of scrimmage game. And this game is going to be a Davion Gauss game for North Carolina. That's what they're going to be doing. This game for Connecticut, they have run the football all season. Cam Edwards, their running back, he's going to be the guy that, provided he plays, is going to get a bunch of carries. They've averaged over 5 yards a carry on the season as a team. The team that runs the football in this game is going to win the game. It's plain and simple to me.
Preston, that is hilarious.
Well, they have to run around the pitchers now. Nice.
This is that just fits so much to a recent podcast I did the other day. Greg, your thoughts on the environment? I mean, I feel like it's an excuse, but Goffer says somebody bring the long cleats. Hopefully they get that right. I know that crowd will have all that ready to go. But Greg, your thoughts on the environment? UConn should be used to it. But Carolina going up north to play in a game like this, you never want to go above the Mason-Dixon line in bowl season. Well, here we are.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters. I do agree that with the weather being a little chilly and possibly a little bit windy, it's
old school Greg Barnes.
It is going to be a ground game type affair, and I think for North Carolina, we all know this, right? Jacoby Criswell struggled a little bit as the season came to a close, and while you would love to have him, Marion Hampton, he would be perfect for this game. It's not going to happen. So both teams have to play in it, and maybe UConn's a little bit more accustomed to the weather. But once you get hit a few times, your blood's boiling anyway. I don't think it's that big.
It's still cold in these conditions, man. It's still freaking cold.
Look at what SMU did.
You got to tough it out, Jason. Got to tough it out.
Look at SMU, though. Look at the quarterback for SMU. The dude looked like he did not want to be anywhere but there the other day because it was
actually,
freezing.
that was a game where I'm convinced that there was a decent amount of wind in that game. I'm convinced that the wind was as much of a factor in that game as anything. It's a cold weather game. He's a small-handed quarterback who's not a big-armed guy throwing a bunch in wind conditions where I think a couple of the balls that he threw, he was surprised by where they ended up because that's just unfamiliar conditions for him. And he wanted to be anywhere but there after the second pick six. It was just a totally different environment. And that's how that can look. So now I will say, I do think, and I can say this more openly now, obviously coaching staffs don't always want you speculating on injuries and all of that in season, especially when it's important like that. But I'm convinced that the final 5-6 weeks of the season, Jacoby Criswell was dealing with a pretty significant, he was pretty nastily banged up.
I think he had a broken rib or ribs, plural.
I think he had multiple broken ribs. I don't have confirmation from inside the Carolina program, I'll say. I don't have confirmation. I didn't ask directly, but I can tell you that guy was not healthy through his ribs. And you could see when at different points when he would go to take a hit, he protected himself in certain ways. It's like, okay, he's got a couple broken ribs. And he, in terms of the way that you have to pull down with your abs and crunch your abs to drive the football, there were times where it was like, okay, he's really hurting. That to me is a factor that in this game, I'm really interested to see what he looks like if he's had a chance to recover a little bit from that. And if he starts to look like the guy who showed some real promise in the first couple games as a starter. Something, again, I think he was banged up. If he gets a little bit of time to throw, he's got a big enough arm that in a windy, cold weather type situation, if he's healthier, if he feels better, this might be an opportunity for him to show that, hey, Belichick, next staff, I'm a guy that is going to contend for that job. I think obviously they're going to try. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to swing hard at one more sort of top level quarterback. Knowing Belichick knows one thing from his career in the NFL. You better have an elite quarterback. If you want to turn something around and you want to be really, really good, it sure helps to have a Tom Brady. So he's going to try to do that. And we've seen the reports about Mateer and the offer that Carolina put on the table for him. But that said, if you're Jacoby Criswell, this is your opportunity to, if it's not for North Carolina, to, it's for elsewhere. But he's going to try to win a job in this game as well. And if he's a little healthier, that's one of the things that I'm most interested in watching in this game, is how he looks after a few weeks off where he's probably had a chance to heal up a little bit.
Yeah, obviously not a reporter, but heard some of the same things about him having broken ribs. I think one of the things, Jason, that you also could notice, he was wearing what I think was a little thicker flak jacket later in the year. But Jason, one of the things I'd ask you is, how different is this going to be without Chip Lindsey, right? Like who's going to call a pass play from, first and goal from the 2 with our Marion Hampton in the backfield if Chip Lindsey isn't here? I'm sorry, I had to be petty for a second. But I do want to ask you, what's the similarity, or what are the through lines going to be between the play calling against UConn as what we probably saw most of the season from Chip Lindsey? Because they're obviously using the same book.
Yeah, generally speaking, you can't change your wholesale offense between the end of the regular season and a pre-January bowl game, even into January. You're not changing things that fast with a whole lot of success. They're going to be using the same terminology, the same basic book, like you said. And frankly, I mean, Freddie Kitchens was part of the staff, the team that put that stuff together. When Chip Lindsey was hired, you remember Freddie Kitchens and Chip Lindsey go back a long way as well. Those guys have been friends and have been influential to each other in football for a long time. So I don't expect to see a lot changed. Now, I think Kitchens will have a hand in how all this is going to get called, personally. I think he's going to have a hand in that. This is just based on my interaction with him and Chip over the last couple of years and at clinics and all that. When they first got hired, Kitchens actually presented certain parts of what they were going to do offensively, because it was stuff that he brought and that Chip was actually integrating into his stuff. So not all of what Chip ran was exactly what Chip brought. There was a melding there a little bit. So some of this, Kitchen stuff is obviously going to stay. I think you're still going to see the same basics. It's going to look familiar in terms of what the overall attack is going to be. The biggest difference when you have something like that, when you go from one play caller to another, but you're still essentially running the same offense, is that certain tendencies will change. Where, one guy likes, in this down and distance, these are the couple things that this guy feels most comfortable with. This other guy might go, I don't like that, the way we've blocked that concept all year. I'd rather do this. And they're two things that you've done all year, but like this tendency, he did this 40% of the time. I'm going to do it like 8% of the time because I just like this other thing that we did 10% of the time, and that's going to be my 40% now. Some things will change a little bit, but that's the way this is going to go. I'm sure Lonnie also, who called the game against Oregon, I'm sure Lonnie is going to have impact here as well. But at the end of the day, Kitchens is going to have the biggest say in terms of what they're doing. And if Galloway is actually the guy that's calling it, he's still going to be on the phones with Kitchens, and they're going to be collaborating a little bit on this. And they'll have done the game plan on, this is what we're doing on 3rd and 2, and this is what we're doing, as you mentioned, on 3rd or 4th and 2 from the on the goal line. Here's what here's what we pre-plan. And I think folks often forget how much of the play calling process is actually, those calls are made for bowl games. Those calls were made 2 weeks ago. Here's our 2-point play. If we get into 2-point conversion range, this is what we're calling. And here's our other 2-point plays. And if we get into overtime, here's our 3 additional ones that we've got in our pocket. And on 3rd and 6, these are our 5 calls. And here's what we're going to go to first. That's just what's done. That's the way football's called these days.
Right, and everybody used to get mad at Larry Fedora because he acknowledged that openly, right? 10 years ago or whatever it was now. It's like, wait a minute, there's not a mad scientist up in the booth calling plays specifically to that down and distance at that point of the game. No, sorry, this is not how it's done anymore. Like Jason said,
There's
map
more
out.
preparation involved than that.
That's right. It's a lot of very situational play calls. And so when you're looking at certain down and distances in a game, you don't have a massive book to pull from. You've got a handful of plays. And those are the ones that you work through. So, yes, Chip Lindsey was the offensive coordinator. Yes, it was his offense. But Jason's exactly right that there is a lot of interaction in game prep to say we think we can have success with this set of plays against these situational downs. And that's going to be no different in this bowl game.
And they're going to be hard-nosed. They are going to try to pound the football because that's what Kitchens believes in. Again, the reason that he's going to be on the Belichick staff is that he very much melds with that philosophy of we're going to be physical and we're going to win football games inside out and on the line of scrimmage. That's the philosophy, and that's what they're going to try to do. Now, Greg, you and I are going, it'll be interesting to see that at North Carolina, but it might be a little early in terms of personnel to see how well that actually works, but color me interested.
There's no secret as to why Freddie Kitchens is the guy that Belichick has asked for his counsel on players on that team. But, Greg, let me ask you a question as far as calling plays. 4th and 1 at the 1. A touchdown wins the game. A field goal gets you to overtime. What are you doing there?
With this roster?
With this roster?
With any roster.
Well, see, that changes,
roster
right?
Dependent.
That's not the same, Tommy.
Okay,
Yeah,
with
roster
Pittsburgh's
dependent.
roster.
That
you didn't watch.
Yeah, I did. I think with Pittsburgh's roster, you go for the win.
Well, see, they went full Narduzzi. You never go full Narduzzi, and they did.
Everybody knows that. Everybody knows
right.
you don't go full Narduzzi.
Right. But
I
it
thought of
is.
Greg Barnes.
It's like North Carolina's offensive line. Let's play that out, right? It's 4th and 1 at the 1, and you can go for the win, or you kick the ball and maybe get to overtime. With what we think the offensive line is going to look like, do you say, okay, I trust this group more often than not? I'm not going to be mean to Pat. Come on. We had Christmas dinner the other night.
You were on his private jet,
Yeah, I mean,
a
come
couple
on.
months ago.
That's how you got home so quick.
That's right. But with what we think North Carolina's offensive line is going to look like, do you say we've got a 70% chance of getting that yard? And if the answer is no, then you have to seriously consider, taking it to overtime and trying to win with a combination of good defensive play and, executing better on your first 3 downs. And that's really what it comes down to. In theory, yes, you're going to go for it every time. But if you don't have an advantage up front and you have a chance to extend the game, well, you extend the game.
And I'm going to pick up on this as well. You have to figure, if you don't have an advantage up front, you need to have an advantage somewhere. And you need to have a call you like. So, you see 4th and 1 and everybody assumes like, okay, well then you should just pound the ball and be able to get 1 yard. Depends on that defense, right? Depends on who you're playing against. If you're playing against, 2018 Clemson on the defensive line, that's probably not a good idea, right? So, at that point, you've got to figure out where your advantage is. And you also have to figure out, okay, do I have a quarterback that I trust? Let's say I go play action and I have a little rub route on the outside and I think I can get my guy open and I'm going to have an advantage there. Do I have a quarterback that I trust to, just toss the ball forward and make sure that he doesn't blow it?
You could get a tight end to throw it if you're Narduzzi.
Yeah.
You could get a tight end to throw it to a defensive tackle.
Yeah, you could.
That game was hilarious.
But no, I mean, I think the thing is you have to figure out, and this is what you're doing in your pregame prep. You can't get into that situation on game day and go, okay, should we go for it? What are we running? This was Nick Saban's thing. This has been Bill Belichick's thing through their whole career. Is if you are asking that question, those questions on game day, it's too late. You underprepared. That's a Thursday question in college football. Thursday coaches meeting, you ask, okay, we have the ball 4th and 1, late in the game with a chance to win, or we kick it to go to overtime. What's your call, offensive coordinator? What do you feel comfortable with? Where's our advantage? What are we running? What's your number 2 call if we've already run that earlier in the game? What happens if this player is out and you're depending on him for this? What's your 3rd call? And this is what every head coach needs to be doing if you're going to be successful at this level long term. My impression is that Pitt actually made that call on the fly. And what you have to do is you have to know, I'm of the view in that context, Pitt should have gone for it. But the problem is I don't think Pitt had a clear call of you have to have 3. I'm a firm believer that in high school ball, you have to come into every game with 3 good 2-point conversion, slash 4th down and 1, 4th down and 2, 4th down and 3 goal line calls. You have to have them. And they're special each week. And if you don't have those, if you don't have something that you're like, I think 80% of the time we're going to get this because we've repped it enough and that guy is going to do it right. If you don't have that, then maybe you can't make that call confidently, but you've got to have that prepped.
And let's not pretend like that game was lost there at the end, right? I mean, the game was lost when you're up 10 on the plus side of the field and you've got a walk-on whose like only skill set is that he's athletic and can run, and you're throwing balls over the middle of the field.
Yeah.
If you don't give them a pick 6 there, then the game, they probably run out of time anyway. But
yep.
Tommy, can I ask a question? I'd love to
anything you want.
I'd love to see. Greg, does your hoodie have sleeves on it?
this one does, yes.
Okay.
I do have one that I'm going to save for a later date that does not have sleeves.
Where did you get it from?
I got it as a birthday gift recently.
Wrong answer. The answer is Johnny T-shirt. The answer is always Johnny T-shirt.
I was going to say it was purchased from Johnny T-shirt.
There we go. Yeah, this is
Yes,
this is the time of the show where we remind you that Johnny T-shirt sponsors this here program and all of IC's content. As you will see if you're watching this, check the bottom. We can see the little ticker down there telling you where to go on your web browser. But yeah, I'm right. I like to say that I'm right because Greg can get a sleeveless Chapel Bill hoodie, or not a sleeveless, but a short sleeve Chapel Bill hoodie from Johnny T-shirt. If you go to johnnytshirt.com, as you see right there at the bottom of your screen, you will see how to procure yourselves one of these short sleeve Chapel Bill hoodies that Johnny T has for you. The people spoke, Johnny T-shirt listened, and if you're one of those people who happens to have an Inside Carolina premium subscription, you can use the code to get an extra 10% off of what Johnny T-shirt listened to you about. Johnny T-shirts is great, folks. They're locally owned and operated, alumni owned and operated. Great family, just awesome place to do business with. We love them because they support IC, but also they're decent people. And speaking at least for myself, I like to be around decent people, and that includes my present company. So if you want to be around decent people, go to Johnny T-shirt, visit them right there on East Franklin Street. Tell them IC sent you. Tommy, back to you, sir.
Yes, sir. National Guys Pay the Bills on the audio version. It's the game plan. Let me throw this up here so we don't forget what we're talking about. It is the Wasabi Fenway Bowl Fenway Bowl, right?
Like, do they give out, like, what's the deal? Are you giving out sushi on the sidelines, or what are we doing here to actually? And why does wasabi have anything to do with Fenway Park? What are we even doing? Are we even trying anymore? Why couldn't we get Snoop Dogg in Boston? Well, I don't know what's happening.
Hey, he's got a bowl game, doesn't he?
I don't know what to do with my hands, Tommy.
I've got a funny story about that, but it's not appropriate for a podcast.
This
Greg,
is going off the rails, man.
It is in a hurry. You know, it's funny. Full disclosure, folks listening to this, about 24 hours ago, I was like, "Oh, smack!" And I didn't say that word. We got to do a game plan. There's a bowl game on Saturday, and luckily it comes together. And Joey did the same thing with Saturday's WCHL show. So we do it all together, and we have fun doing it. And Joey is the best at kissing up to the present company. That's why he is here, folks. I'm going to Greg. So, Greg, talk to me. What happens here for North Carolina? Let's actually talk about a game plan. What does North Carolina do in this game to come out with a win, but not only that, to impress their new coach who will be watching from afar, and what players do you think will shine? That's what this whole segment's about. Here, game plan.
Well, since we're alluding to Bill Belichick, let's start on the defensive side of the ball. And as we talked about earlier, not having Kamon Rucker is a significant blow. And one of the reasons why is Carolina's had some success, spotty success, but they've had success kind of getting after the pass or some. And that's going to be important. Joe Fagnano's the quarterback. He was backing up Nick Evers. There's kind of an interesting story there. He actually won the starting job last year. So in training camp of 2023, started a couple games and got injured. Evers came in, played okay. And then Evers actually won the job this year. And due to some injuries and eventually kind of losing the job, Fagnano has been back in. He's not a runner, but he's a bigger guy. And he's a pretty skilled passer. And when you look at his PFF numbers, it's a tale of two sides, right? When he's kept clean, he's got about a 78 grade, 17 touchdowns against 2 interceptions, pretty solid, 65% completion percentage, 74% adjusted completion percentage. However, when you put some heat on him, under pressure, his grade is 28.2. 0 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays, 25.6% completion percentage, 2 picks against a touchdown. So that's night and day. And if he's able to sit back there and take his time and go through his reads, he will have success. And that's a problem for North Carolina because I think the offensive line scares me for North Carolina. So I think the defense is really going to have to hold its own and really help North Carolina win this game. So they've got to find ways to get pressure on Fagnano. And that's a key component. Jason highlighted the fact that they've been able to run the ball somewhat effectively. So that's going to be a key part too. Everybody knows if you're able to run significantly on first and second down, stay ahead of the chains, get into manageable third down situations, that really benefits the quarterback. That can't happen. So it's going to be really interesting to see how aggressive North Carolina decides to be, because either you get after the quarterback and find ways to create pressure, or you go back to the whole Gene Chizik mindset of we just didn't have the guys, therefore we're going to sit back and wait for them to make mistakes. Obviously, that's not what Jeff Collins has ever liked to do. And so without having some key pieces, that game plan, I think it's going to be very important for North Carolina to be able to rattle Fagnano a little bit.
Jason, your take on Carolina's approach on defense. I mean, we've talked about, and Greg mentioned, Beau Atkinson, Desmond Evans. I mean, his last game as a North Carolina defensive end or rush in. You got Joshua Harris. I mean, the only one that's missing is Kamon Rucker, unless I'm totally missing something on that. Ritzie, yep, forgot Jawari Ritzie, who flashed in some games but was not out there in others, it seemed like. So, Jason, your approach here from the Carolina defense, Jeff Collins, going against a UConn team who, as Greg put it, has had some success. I do find it interesting that their only losses are ACC schools and Maryland, who was an ACC school. That's a weird schedule. But anyway, Jason, what you got on the defensive side?
Yeah, a couple things. One is just a little bit of quiz here for our panelists, our other panelists. Where did North Carolina rank?
Get loud.
Where did North Carolina rank in blitz percentage per dropback this season nationally? And I'll just restrict it to Power 4 games. So against the Power 4, where did North Carolina rank in blitz percentage? Any thoughts on that?
I guess
talked
bottom
about
three,
this.
bottom third.
I would say middle of the pack.
It's a little surprising. So North Carolina's blitz rate per dropback on the season was 108th
Wow.
at 21%.
So
108th.
So aggressiveness, not aggressive. I mean, that is a surprising number.
Fake mayhem.
Yeah, that's an interesting number, right? So 108th. Now, that's thrown off a little bit by about 10 teams where, you've got 1 or 2 games against Power 5 competition. But when you remove that limit, they're still in the same quartile, essentially. North Carolina still 93rd nationally. So way down there. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not aggressive, because you can be aggressive by how you turn your defensive line loose, by a variety of different things, by mugging backers into the gaps and, simulated pressures and all of this. But I do think it tells you a little bit about what to expect in this game. You are not going, especially with guys that are no longer out there, you're not going to see a bunch of blitz calls, even though you've got the Minister of Mayhem calling defenses. And look, I thought he actually called a good year on the whole. Even though you've got that, I think the focus is going to be stack the box with, the effort to force them to throw on second and third down from leverage without blitzing. You're going to see some vanilla fronts, essentially, trying to just play honest, hard-nosed up the field defense, essentially, and then win on third down. Essentially, that's what you're going to see. Now, so that's on the offensive side, or on the defensive side, when you're looking at their offense, and you mentioned Fagnano, his numbers. You mentioned the weird schedule. It's interesting that his 3 worst games as a player there were against Duke, where he only had 2 dropbacks in that game, but he did not do well in that game with 1 turnover worthy play on those 2 dropbacks, and then Syracuse and UMass. Against the teams that really you don't expect to be able to pressure him, Merrimack, he played great. FAU, not bad, but not quite as well as against Buffalo. And Temple and UAB, better. But he really did. You can see it's not just about the pressure, it's the quality of team. When he played against teams that just had players to limit what they could do offensively, those were the teams that were able to get him pressure. And when he went up against better teams, he struggled, and their offense struggled. To me, if Beau Atkinson is out there, and I expect him to be out there, he's maybe the key to this game on defense. Can he help set the edge against the run? And then can he provide enough pressure to create a couple turnover-worthy plays? Beau Atkinson is going to be critical in this game to me.
Staples, why would you say Atkinson instead of one of the linebackers with Eccles being out?
Because I think Atkinson is a guy who has created mayhem. He has created havoc over the course of the season with the way that he's gotten after the quarterback, with some of the tackle for loss numbers. Aside from Kamen Rucker, I think Atkinson has been Carolina's most disruptive player in the front 6, front 7. If you were going to ask, if you put truth serum into Carolina's coaching staff and ask them this year, who are your 3 best defensive players, they'd obviously mention Rucker. And then they'd go to number 28. He's pretty good corner. So Rucker, Huzzy, and I think Atkinson. And it would be a discussion on whether Huzzy or Atkinson was number 2. So, I think Atkinson, the question is whether he's going to create sufficient havoc to create a turnover or 2 or end 2 or 3 drives with, tackle for loss or sack. Can they find ways to get him one-on-one? Because the thing is, you don't have your starters at some of those other spots. This is the real trick. Is the Minister of Mayhem going to be able to get advantageous matchups to get one-on-ones with the guy that he wants to get those one-on-ones? And that's going to be Beau Atkinson. He's going to try to simulate pressure here to have this guy in this gap. Why? Well, he's not actually blitzing, but he's influencing that guy so that guy can't double team Beau Atkinson. That's what he's going to try to do. And if Atkinson can get some one-on-ones and win those one-on-ones, then it doesn't matter as much that you don't have some of the other guys. If they're able to double team him, which is what teams were able to do when Rucker was not out there, and that's Rucker changed things because now you had Atkinson and Rucker, and that was a problem. If they're able to double him and able to neutralize him, I think it's going to be a long day for Carolina defensively.
Yeah, and to expand on what Jason highlighted there about the blitz rate, I think it's important for fans to understand the concept of simulated pressure and havoc. Jay Bateman talked about it quite a bit. Collins hadn't talked about it quite as much, but does kind of the same idea. Blitz rate's based on how many guys you send. So if you're sending 5 guys, that counts. If you're just sending 4, it doesn't count. And that's important because if you're dropping back a defensive lineman, well, then you can send a defensive back or linebacker. If you look at North Carolina's numbers this year, the defensive backs are credited with 53 pass rushes. So that's when they went after the quarterback. So, in a normal setting, you call that a blitz. Linebackers was about 3 times that. So when you do the math there, roughly 17 times a game, you had either a linebacker or a defensive back rushing the passer. And most people see those positions get after the quarterback, think, well, there's a blitz. Well, if all 4 defensive linemen are getting after the quarterback as well, and one of those guys joins as a 5th or even a 6th pass rush, then that's the situation. Of course, some of that is doubled up, right? So it may not be 17 on the nose. It may be you rushed up 2 linebackers or whatever it may be. But that's important, that it's not just a matter of sending 5 or 6 guys. It's dropping a defensive end into the flat or into, wherever the tight end may be, and operating that way. That the simulated pressure concept is very important to what people like Jeff Collins wants to do.
And simulated pressure is modern college football defense.
Yeah.
And, I was talking with an SEC defensive coordinator, messaging, I should say. Talking is an interesting concept in communication these days, because most of us communicate via email and text more than we do by talking.
I think it counts. I think texting counts as talking to somebody.
But yeah, I was texting an SEC defensive coordinator earlier this year, and he was commenting on, and I think I mentioned this before, on how important it is to change the picture after the snap now in college football, how that's gotten much more important since iPads have been allowed on the sideline. And he said that was a bigger factor than helmet communication, or as big a factor as helmet communication for defensive coordinators. Now, obviously, signal stealing, part of that is another factor that, we didn't discuss on that. But it's more about, if you show specific looks and then they know the next time out on the field that if they see that look, this is what it is, you're dead, because they will have gone through on the sideline. As soon as that quarterback and that offensive line gets to the sideline and those receivers get to the sideline, they're breaking out the iPad and they're saying, okay, let's take a look. All right, here they are. He's mugging in this gap, and then he drops out here, and then they end up in cover 7. Here's what we're going to do. We see that look again. in this context against this formation, here's how we're going to hit it. And if you come out and you run the same thing on the next drive or the next opportunity where it's that down and distance against that formation and you show the same look and you do the same thing, you are going to get cut up. So now you'd better be able to mug and simulate pressure on one snap, and then 2 snaps later, look exactly the same thing, and this time that guy comes. And it's not simulated, because you've got to have that variation. Otherwise, you're going to get absolutely destroyed in modern football.
Let's flip it over, and let's talk a little offensive side quick. We're here on the game plan. We're 56 minutes in or so. Shout out to the 250 Plus joining us on a Friday early evening, we'll call it. Joey, I'll come to you first, and then we can kind of go quickly on the offensive side, because I think we've talked about it already. It's hand the ball to Goss, hand the ball to those running backs, stay out of long chains, and keep Criswell clean, and throw, to Jason's point, throw when you don't have to, more so than throwing when you have to. Joey, your take here on the offensive side, and we'll go around the room.
Yeah, I'd like to see them. Move the ball on first down. I know that's a big no shit Sherlock moment, but like if they can move the ball on first down, I think that largely dictates what they're able to do the rest of the game. I do think there will be some opportunities to go downfield, which Criswell didn't exactly do really well with this year. But Jason's point about his injury or how sore he is looms large for that. And I think we'll be able to tell pretty early on if they've got confidence in him kind of cutting loose and testing the UConn back four. That's where I think UConn has been mostly vulnerable. Again, this is based off what little bit I was able to see earlier today watching some highlight tape. But where UConn has been vulnerable on the back end, you just wonder, does North Carolina have the ability to capitalize on that? Because North Carolina was not a good deep ball team this year. And they did not have receivers that could get the separation that they needed, especially against, better ACC competition. Now, you can joke about the ACC, or you can joke about where UConn falls in the ACC, but North Carolina's receivers are not going to just be able to go out there and run past UConn. So if they can find a way to scheme some things up, and then if Criswell feels healthy enough to test them downfield, I think there's some opportunities there. But for me, the biggest thing is get yardage on first down. Tommy, I know you mentioned a second ago, and I'm not trying to oversimplify, but playing behind the chains was kryptonite for this team most of the season, and I don't see that changing against UConn.
Jason, offensive approach. And something I meant to ask earlier, but who's going to be tomorrow's Caleb Cost? Because I think Caleb Cost broke out in the Holiday Bowl against Oregon last year and sort of put his name on the map. Who might be that player?
I thought it was West Virginia last year, Tommy.
Yeah,
you're right.
He's
you're right. It's a West Virginia game.
You're mixing up Caleb Cost and Josh Downs on that.
No, Josh Downs was Texas A&M.
Was the A&M Orange Bowl game.
I'm just over football. I've got Georgia Tech on, watching them lay an egg. And but who's going to be this year's Caleb Cost? I mean, obviously he played well against West Virginia last year. Anyway, Jason, your offensive approach, and who might be that guy we don't expect?
Yeah, I would look at a couple of the guys, Rodney Laura and maybe Joel Starling, somebody like that would be the guys that I would look at as potentials there. I'm not sure who else. I mean, maybe one of the freshman DBs who've been pretty impressive, but I'm not sure that that's the side of the ball that I'm expecting there to be a big breakout. I think if I had to choose one guy that's going to be like, maybe this is a coming out for him. First of all, Goss, if he's an option there, I mean, I'm not sure he is because he's already shown enough this year, would be an obvious choice. But beyond that, I think Jordan Shipp has a chance in this game to really make a mark. And this gets to something that you pointed out, Joey. They're playing against a secondary that has struggled this year against better competition. So Duke went for 267 yards, 6.2 per attempt, 3 touchdowns and a pick against them. And we saw Duke. Duke didn't throw the football that well this year, right? Syracuse, went 37 of 47 for 470 yards against this secondary. Now, North Carolina did not throw it as efficiently as Syracuse this year. But I do think that this is one of those games where if Jacoby Criswell is significantly healthier and is throwing it a little bit better than he was at the end of the season, this is one of those games where I'm tempted to take a couple, seam shots early in the game, off of play action. So you play action that and you try to hit that slot on the seam right up the center of the field. You take a couple hole shots up the sideline. You give some opportunities to get some vertical wins in the passing game. And this is a game where I expect them to really audition those young wide receivers. This is a postseason exhibition game. This is not a regular season game where you're trying to win the conference or whatever. This is an opportunity to find out, okay, well, Coach Belichick wants to know what we have in Billups. He wants to know what we have in Jordan Shipp. He wants to know what we have in, go down the line, Christian Hamilton, Chris
Alex
Cullen.
Taylor, Tommy Ashley's
Alex
kids,
Taylor.
Heisman winner.
Yeah.
They won the Heisman in 2026, 7.
Yeah. So, you've got a series of young wide receivers that if I'm trying to win this game, if like the objective is just to win the game, and of course we know Herm Edwards said, you play to win the game. But if that's my only objective, then I come out and I pound the rock as much as I can, and I'm trying to hit some verticals or whatever. But if I'm treating this as an opportunity to audition certain guys for and show my incoming coach whose staff I'm going to be on, if I'm trying to give him an indication of what some of these guys look like with the lights on, I'm giving especially those young wide receivers some extra opportunities in this game. And so don't be surprised if you see some of that in this game, some opportunities for some of those guys downfield in the screen game to see more young wide receivers in this game than we've seen all season. And if I'm coaching this game, if I'm Freddie Kitchens, I'm not just coaching this game to win the game. I'm coaching this game for next year. I'm wanting to see who I have, and I'm wanting to let these guys show this incoming coach who I think the world of and whose staff I'm going to be on. I want him to see everything he needs to see going into next year. That's priority one, and I want to win the game. So I'm trying to throw the football maybe a little bit more in this game than you might expect.
This is a AAA manager game for Freddie Kitchens.
Bingo.
See, isn't that a good segue? Fenway, right, Tommy?
All right, there you go.
Brilliant.
Look, I'm
This
still
is why we
recovering
pay Greg the
from.
medium bucks.
In fairness to my earlier mistake, everybody forgot the Mayo Bowl last year. So did I. But Greg, wrap us up here on the actual game plan portion, and then we'll do our picks, and we'll see who can come away with the pick championship. I think I'm in the lead, but go ahead.
Okay, so UConn, as has been pointed out, played a really poor schedule this year, ranked 128th according to ESPN's FBI calculations. They played, according to F+, they played two teams ranked in the top 60. Two teams all year long, and lost both of those games. Now, having said that,
Syracuse, right?
having said that, Carolina's schedule ranked 93rd nationally. Carolina played 5 teams ranked in the top 60, and they were 1-4 in those games, the lone victory being the very first game of the year. So, yes, UConn has played a worse schedule than North Carolina, but let's not – this is not like an SEC team versus UConn, right? So I think that's an important point. The other thing, I think everybody's been exactly right with the concept here. My concern is that part of the reason that North Carolina has struggled with the deep passing game, as Joey pointed out, you don't have Drake May back there for one, but there also hasn't been a ton of time to throw the ball. And so what I think you're going to see is you want to take a few shots, but those are probably going to be rare situations with the offensive line situation. So you may have a few calls where you max protect and take a shot down the field. Because Criswell has not been great either with the medium routes, the 10 yards and 19 yards. Those numbers have not been fantastic. So when you've got such veteran players at your skill positions at wide receiver and tight end, you got to figure out a way to get those in the game. And as Jason did a good job there, you can really mix it up. And whether it's screens, whether it's getting them the ball in the backfield, whether it's just a little slants or whatever that may be, I think that's where you can get creative, and that's where you have a chance to really have success offensively, because UConn understands the offensive line situation. They're going to really try to bottle up the running game. And I imagine they'll probably have a decent amount of success doing that. Now, if Carolina can run the ball, everything's changed and Carolina probably wins easily. But North Carolina's ability, not just being stubborn running the ball, because I think that can get you in trouble if you don't have the skill set and the talent in place to do that successfully. But if you're willing to throw the ball on early downs, as Jason's highlighted earlier, and get creative in the short passing game zone, you can really capitalize and have some success in moving the ball. And once you get some momentum, well, everything kind of changes and it kind of snowballs. And I think that's the key for North Carolina is not be stubborn, be creative. Don't get greedy either. Don't try to throw a lot of deep shots to win on catastrophic plays for the defense, but to really take advantage of those unique routes and get creative and pull from those plays, and maybe you can have some success that way.
Good stuff, Greg. Good stuff, everybody. On that portion, I'm going to talk about congruity. Matt at Congruity, it's my go-to. The financials added up for North Carolina to have Bill Belichick as the head coach. CongruityHR.com can help your financials to add up for your small business and mid-sized business to blow up and get into the new era of the world that we call today. Email Matt at CongruityHR.com. Get your small to mid-sized business free assessment if you're an Inside Carolina person. Let them hook you up with the best plan. They did it themselves. They did it locally. They started locally. It's national. They can do the same for you. Matt at CongruityHR.com for your small to mid-sized business free assessment. Predictions, boys. And Joey, since you're the new guy on the block, I feel like I'm getting drugged across the finish line. I feel like we're at the beep test for UNC women's soccer, or we're at the mile test for basketball, and you guys are carrying the old man across the line. So let's get to it. Joey, give me your predictions for tomorrow. 11 o'clock, Fenway Bowl, Wasabi Fenway Bowl. And look, somebody in the chat said the loser has to eat a bowl of wasabi.
Well, hang on. Follow that up. He actually did some searching and found out that Wasabi is a tech company that handles like cloud services. It's not just the stuff that we eat with our sushi. So I kind of liked it better when it was a sushi play because it made less sense.
They might need to do a little better on their marketing, but then again, they're sponsoring.
That's why they're sponsoring this
game.
Random bowl that starts at 11 a.m. on a Saturday, right? As far as my prediction, maybe I'm not the normal guy that does picks on the show, but I'll say I think it's going to be 27-24, 27-21, something like that. Tar Heels. I just think at the end of the day, as I was alluding to earlier in the show, I think North Carolina probably has better talent even with the opt-outs. And just defaulting to that, the fact that they've got a little different motivation as opposed to what they've been listened to for the last 5 or 6 years.
Jason, we didn't write them down, so I predict these will be very close.
We're not writing them down.
I'm letting Jason go first.
I got a question. I got another quiz question for everybody.
Man, as long as it's not math.
UConn's pressure rate on the season. So, Greg, you mentioned that Carolina had trouble protecting the passer this year and that was a big factor in their inability to attack teams downfield. Where did UConn rank in pressure rate this season?
106th.
I think they were probably pretty good. I'm guessing because again, from what I watched recently, they looked okay in that part of their game.
What do you think?
I think they got to be at the bottom.
Yeah, so
not good.
When not factoring in Power 4 when not factoring in Power 4, they were 89th. Okay, against Power 4, which is, just the few games that they played. So that's, Duke, Syracuse, Maryland, and so on. They were 118th in their 4 Power 4 games. So that we might be talking about the movable, the immensely movable object versus the featherweight force when it
very
comes
stoppable
to
force.
a very stoppable force when it comes to protecting the passer in this game. I'm concerned about Carolina up front on offense in this game, no question. But if it was against a team that was not basically what UConn has been in terms of rushing the passer, and by the way, they actually blitz a reasonably high percentage, but they just don't get there. I would be much more concerned about it if Carolina was playing a team that did a better job of generating havoc and pressuring the passer. I think Carolina is still the better team in this game and should win this game. I think they'll be able to run the football well enough, and I think there will be a couple big plays in the passing game. I'm going to go with Carolina to win this as well. I'm going to go with Carolina winning 31 to, we'll say 31 to 28.
All right. Greg, you're up. Jason's audio started going south there, so it's my signal to get us out of here. Greg, what you got? Final prediction of the season. We'll let Buck Sanders, the morning after column on Sunday, decide who wins the championship.
So, Jason, just listening to him tonight, it seems like there's a lot of confidence in Carolina, yet his score margin was only 3 points, which is pretty much where I am.
It's a 2.5 point spread now, Greg.
Well, let's talk about that. So, FEI, they do projections based on all the different metrics, and the bowl game metrics and predictions are way off, and they acknowledge that because it doesn't factor in all the opt-outs and those types of things. So when you remove the opt-outs from the equation, Carolina was projected by the metrics to win by about 9 points. As you mentioned, the spread is what, 2.5 now, 3 points. So
opened at 5. It's been UConn's been bet up to 2.5.
Yeah. So we've had this conversation before of what is player value worth in terms of points, right? EPA. And K'Mon Rucker, is that 2 points? When you start talking about Lampkin, how much is he worth? Power Eccles, Ritzy, Ant Lane. I don't know what that number is, but I think that speaks to why you see a 9-point advantage for a healthy, full North Carolina team versus this UConn team to where we are now, where it's a field goal game. I think that's the fascinating part of it. I do think, as I mentioned to start the show, I think with North Carolina having the idea of they're playing for the new boss, who's completely different than the old boss, that's going to help make sure that they are fully engaged. And I'm not sure you can say the same about UConn because everything's just kind of been run of the mill for them. Therefore, this may be more of an exhibition game for that team. We'll have to see. Because of that, though, because of the specter that is Bill Belichick waiting in the wings and waiting on them to get home from Boston, I do think Carolina pulls this game out. My confidence level is not as high as Jason's, but I think Carolina wins an ugly, ugly, beautiful game at Fenway. I think this is going to be a 21-17 North Carolina game.
So
Who
you don't
are
have
you?
Let me get this straight. You don't have
Man,
as much
you
confidence
stepped on
as
my
me.
line.
You don't have as much confidence as me, but you
Right?
picked them to win by 1 more point than I did.
Yes, exactly. Isn't that great?
Our
I think
pets'
that's
heads
perfect.
are falling off.
I know, really. I think I'm gonna win this one again, boys.
I don't even understand what I just said, but there it is.
It is. It's early on a Friday evening,
Oh my gosh.
2 days after Christmas, so there's no telling what's going on in these houses. I'm gonna go 30-25, Carolina. wins in an ugly ball game. with
Scorigami.
Turnovers of plenty. Yeah,
Scorigami.
scorigami. The ACC finally gets on the board. I mean, what is it now? 0-5.
It's 0 and a lot. It's 0 for all year.
Yeah, Vanderbilt abuses Georgia Tech. It's just a crazy year, but I think Carolina gets on the board against
The portal's been abusing Georgia Tech is what's been happening.
Very, very accurate there. Though Haynes King did play, and he was virtually ineffective against Vanderbilt. And then, anyway, I'm getting out of here. Joey, hope we've done enough for Inside Carolina Live. Greg, it's always a pleasure. Jason, I will talk to you on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock on the day after with the esteemed Buck Sanders. Maybe he'll make more sense of it all. Carolina, Fenway Bowl, Wasabi, the tech company giant, Fenway Bowl, UConn.
Wasabi.
Well,
I was going to
did
do
not.
it.
I wanted to not get that one. But anyway, 11 o'clock on ESPN. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina. Shout out to anybody that's in Boston up there. It's supposed to be cold and damp and rainy. It will be quite toasty in front of the big screen. One of the few times the big screen is better than the northern cold. Greg, Jason, Johnny T-shirt, Joey, Congruity. I'm Tommy Ashley. We out.